What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more acid-trance, and we're back with some very acidic acid-trance, meaning sometimes I use that phrase to refer to tunes that are technically hard trance or they're technically progressive trance, but they have a notable acid component. And then there's some acid trance that's just straight away acid trance, where it's the bass line, it's the melody, everything is this immersive acid experience. This is very much in that vein. So it's like acid trance, proper noun instead of acid trance common noun, if that makes any sense. But we're going to listen to a tune. I'm trying to remember the year. And this is one that a good friend of the channel, Tassos, has been talking about and has requested. And it's, make sure I get this right, The Concept of Roundness and NeuroUmbilical Energy by Choci and the Freedom of Sound. Though I have to say, and without wading into it too much myself, because, this is me just being an observer, if you go on Discogs, like Choci and Freedom of Sound have had, a discussion, debate, and Freedom of Sound, I forget the guy's real name, but he's essentially argued that some of these tunes which are labeled as Choci and Freedom of Sound, they were really produced by him. Choci, contributed some ideas, and in some cases, brought one of the tunes to a distributor before he even told Freedom of Sound. So there's a bit of discussion and debate as to maybe these tracks shouldn't be labeled the way they are, or were they really co-produced. Either way, again, that's not my ball game to discuss or to analyze. All I will say is that if you go on Discogs and you follow the different labels and you comment on different releases, you end up seeing these things. And I forget what record page the discussion in question is on. I think there's a couple different ones, but there's one where Freedom of Sound has a very long comment that a lot of people have interacted with. And so again, I remember reading that and being intrigued by it, just knowing that again, hearing the way that a lot of the early acid techno, there was cross-pollination, people making tunes in other people's studios, people contributing an idea even though they weren't technically one of the producers on the track. So I've just always been interested by the way that the history of the production of the tracks themselves. So I was intrigued to read that. Nevertheless, this is listed as a Choci and Freedom of Sound tune. And as I said, it has a very lengthy name. I do want to mention the main track on the release is Return to Transition, trance, T-R-A-N-C, but then Ishin, I-T-I-O-N, Return to Transition. And there's also a Tangerine Dream Transition mix, though I believe this is Tangerine Dream as a concept remix, not actually Tangerine Dream. But this is all a reply to an earlier record on Aura Surround Sounds, which is again Choci and Freedom of Sound, and it's just the regular Transition, although there's a Mongolian 303 Heaven mix on the other side. So yeah, this is essentially the second in a pair of releases themed around the Transition release, but I do believe the concept of roundness and NeuroUmbilical energy is by far the superior tune, both in relation to the Return to Transition, but also the original Transition. So anyway, here we go. This is, and I don't remember the year, but I'll look it up before I post it, and I'll put it in the video description. I'm going to guess 96, at latest 97, but this is Choci and Freedom of Sound, The Concept of Roundness and NeuroUmbilical Energy. I'm going to assume 45, but if it's not, I'll adjust it quickly. And as you can see, I have 2 copies of this. Whoop. Normally, if one has an outer plastic sleeve, my assumption is that's the better copy. I don't know that for sure in this case, but I'm trusting the past Shnootz to inform the current situation. that synth riff. Meanwhile, the pulsing acid now taking on a sharper character. But it'll keep doing that, it'll keep phasing the different acid textures. Old school vocal, like choral synths. In a way, they tell you the era of production. I don't think too many people use those anymore, but it's vintage. It's just classic. Gonna up the elasticity. Gonna go into double time. We have like a cricket layer behind it. Funny, there's so much going on, and yet my brain just keeps focusing on that lead acid line. Like I just can't break away from it. Again, it's like acid-trance for acid-tumbler. It's like It's funny, it's like 7.5 something minute tune. Just get lost in it. I felt like I could go a few more minutes. Which is funny because there's a moment in that where it reminded me of some Solar Quest stuff, his Acid Crumble tunes, which there's like part 1 and part 2, and then there's a later release where there's just a track called Acid Crumble. I believe it's part 1. Either way, all the versions of Acid Crumble and a number of George Solar Quest Saunders early tracks are these real, like, euphoric, otherworldly, lengthy acid journeys. And again, Acid Crumble, like both versions, are maybe the best example of that. So, like, during part of that, I was thinking it reminded me of one of his tunes, which again, George's tunes are on Choci's tunes, or at least like his, biggest hits in both versions of Acid Crumble. So yeah, it feels very much like of the sound and the style of the labels and the studio, which again, like, not commenting on like any production, the idea that like Choci's labels were putting out a certain sound, I think is pretty clear, and I'll always respect that. And whether it's the main label or here like an adjacent label, Aura Surround Sounds, I don't know, like I think it was more like licensed, like they were tunes from Choci's label / studio, and then they were used for the it was licensed to another label. But either way, again, like whether it's George's tunes or Freedom of Sound here, definitely a cool, euphoric, like otherworldly type of layer. And the reason I said it's funny, or type of atmosphere, and the reason I said it's funny is because both Acid Crumbles, I think part 1 is like 15 minutes, part 2 is like over 21 minutes. And Solar Quest has other tunes, like there's a much more aggressive and like fast acid-trance tune called, what is it, Harmonation, or is it Revelation? It's like it's the same tune. One is like an ambient tune that's 26 minutes long. One is an acid-trance tune that's 26 minutes long. Either way, oh, that's right, it's Harmonation Energic Trance. But the point is, like, even though I joke, like, oh, that could go several more minutes, this type of acid trance, you do get tracks that are like 15, 20 minutes long. So it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that it might go longer. But yeah, absolutely killer tune. I do think, as I said, it's the best track on the vinyl, even if both Transition, the Tangerine Dream Mix and Return to Transition are both good. But as I said, I think this one is the winner. Once again, shout out the Tassos who reminded me about this tune, and I will continue to field such requests. So again, whether on Facebook chat or otherwise, do let me know. And yeah, ultimately I am going to be reacting to an old school tune. I'm going to put it in the early rave playlist, even though it's from '95. So that one should come soon. I won't spoil it yet, but it's a tune that anyone who had any familiarity with like underground dance music in the 90s would definitely know. So look forward to that. In the meantime, let me know what you think about this, if I can speak, and I will see you next time. Peace.